From the liberal Northeast comes a lone voice of truth. Honest commentary in dishonest times. Think deeper with Juan Newsom. This is the Cure Radio Program. This is the Cure.
It's about to record. Let's wait now. Okay, folks, today we have on our person, Miss Katina Person. She is an entrepreneur. She works in areas of insurance and in finance. She's also very socially aware. She's probably the best sociologist I've ever seen. Welcome to the show, Katina. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I've been wanting to have you on like forever. You just have a different take on the issues and a different point of view. And what I admire the most is your ability to kind of step back and really assess. And, it's totally emotion removed from a lot of your analysis. Just dipping right into the subject matter. I wanted to get your take on the current state of the black vote. As you know, to me, when I look at the Democratic primary, there's a divide between the older African Americans and the younger African Americans. As you saw in the South Carolina primary, the older African Americans, the boomers, they seem to kind of trend it towards Biden, while Bernie Sanders kind of captured the youth vote. Now, being that, when I look at, Bernie Sanders, and, make no bones about it, he is a straight up communist. That's just apparently clear if you've studied communism and you know what it is. And I think the issue with Americans, a lot of us, we don't actually truly know what communism is, not this generation anyway. I want to get your take on something. Is the black vote worth chasing for Republicans, given those facts?
I would say, and I've shared this before, I do not think the black vote is worth chasing per se. I do think that what has to happen is the Republican Party should come up with ways to engage the black community, just like they have to come up with ways to engage the Hispanic community or any other community. Because whether people like it or not, and I have shared this before and people just go crazy, but the country is younger and the country is more minority.
Yep.
And that's just where it's going. And unless we want a situation where, even if it's not within this lifetime, it's within our lifetime, even though I do feel that the way things are going, it most likely will be in our lifetime, which is horrible for people like me because I do not want to be elderly and living under socialism or communism. However, we have to also think about what type of world we want for our children. People have children and grandchildren. Even if it's not you, do you want your children and grandchildren living under a socialist and communist society? Because we have seen what that produces. Why do you want your offspring to live under that type of system? And unless we have a way to engage people other than what is the traditional method, that may very well be their future. And I think it's very important, and it's going to be very challenging because we have to, if you support the GOP, whether you're a hardcore conservative or as the rhinos, as people call it, that's another thing. We have to focus on what we do agree on the most and stop bickering amongst ourselves on the little things that we agree, because we have to remember that even at the end of the day, our biggest enemy is going to be the socialists and the communists, and that is full of the Progressive Party. That's the enemy.
Yeah.
And once they're defeated, then we can come around, circle back around, and tackle our own issues. But we have to stay away from identity politics. I think that's very important because that's not going to work for the Republican Party.
Yeah. I definitely think that, I do feel encouraged because you have more minority Republicans like running for office. And that's a trend that's increased since, I want to say, 2010. And, I have to credit that to Obama, really, because, being the first Black president, a lot of Black conservatives kind of came out of the closet and started running for some of these offices. You look at Allen West and some of the other Blacks that are in the Republican Party that are running in the current primaries now. So I see there's a trend of minorities running. You saw the last Republican primary in 2016. You had Rubio, you had Cruz, you had Carson, you had Jindal, all of those from diverse, ethnic backgrounds. And so there is a little bit of encouragement there where we're lacking. And this goes back to something that you said, educating the youth, and Republican politicians come to me sometimes and they ask me, how do I engage Blacks or whatever? And I had one of my friends ran for Daphne. She ran for mayor of Philadelphia. She was somewhat successful at getting her name out there, but she wasn't elected, unfortunately. But when I see things like that, and I tell other Republican establishment kind of, kingmakers, I'm like, okay, you guys got to go in some of these inner cities and like take it back. One thing about the Democrats, they'll go in a Republican district or city or whatever, and they'll take it. But Republicans don't go in and they don't take the Democrat districts, and that's why Virginia's blue now. Florida is going to be blue before you know it. With the influx of Puerto Ricans and with Democrats going from county to county down there, they're trying to turn North Carolina blue. I've been reading certain trends and stories down there. A friend of mine who's a consultant there, we've been talking about this. North Carolina is under attack. So, I see that and I'm like, okay, what can the GOP do? What can the GOP do during the future going forward? And, the best thing is to get down there on the local level and start taking some of these places back, implementing good, sound policy, because we're only a couple of elections away from, not winning the White House for a while. Yeah, given the demographic changes and so forth. So.
No, I 100% agree, and I'm also Facebook friends with Daphne, and I followed her campaign very closely. And what happened is it's not just that she did not win. She honestly did not get the support from the Philadelphia GOP, if you were following that very closely. And so that's another thing that the GOP has to work on internally. Because once we started discussing that and some other people as well, I found out that that's not an uncommon thing for people across the board, like in different states. You have a lot of people now who I know people who are Black, but maybe they don't identify as Republican anymore. They identify as Libertarian or something, and not so much because they follow the Libertarian politics, because they know that on a national stage, Libertarians most likely will not win. I know that may offend your audience because Libertarians always go crazy when you say that, but it's true. And, the thing is that they're not getting that support as a GOP candidate. So the GOP has to really, the best, if they think that the best way they're going to engage the Black community is like Democrats by having fish fries and going around with hot sauce in their pockets and eating chicken all day, that's not the way it's going to get done. The best way they want to get done is they have to do things internally and really start supporting candidates that know how to connect with the community in a sincere and genuine way. You have to have those people who know how to connect with the community. And I don't mean the Black elites, because they are solidly Democrats. You have to connect with these middle-class, working-class people. And I'm going to say this really quick. You know that I can be very, down on the impact that the Republicans are making. But one thing I have always said for the past couple of years, and I'm someone who I am involved at the local level and definitely working with the Black community. And what I see more than ever is they're more discontent with the Democratic Party than I've ever seen before. They're willing to listen, but the Republicans have to have the right message. And so far, they haven't crafted the correct message. But I wish that they did, because this is the number. I've never seen more Black people, and I do mean younger people, middle people. The older people kind of lost, and some of the younger people are kind of lost. But that middle people, I personally think we need to focus on the Gen X people, because that's going to be the group that can really, even though they're smaller than millennials and they're smaller than the boomers, but if we can get enough of them to switch, it will lessen the impact of the Sanders and the Bidens. It will lessen that impact.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, wow, that's great. That's a lot. That's a lot of good analysis there, because I'm sitting here scratching my head. I'm like, why is Bernie getting such a push, and what can we do about it? And I thought maybe it would take Gen X and the boomers to override the millennials going forward. But the boomers are getting older. You can't, they're not going to be here forever. So
No, it would have to be the younger boomers that's kind of close to the Gen Xers, and the Gen Xers kind of working together to get them. Like I said, you do have some people who are younger, who are millennials, maybe the older millennials. So maybe we focus on Gen Xers, the older millennials, the younger boomers, and kind of try to work that angle, because I know people are just speaking about it now, but if you remember, you and I had a conversation. Two conversations I remember. One is I was the one who told you during the hurricane, because I remember sitting right where I'm sitting right now, having a conversation with you, telling you that those Puerto Ricans were going to flip Florida. I said, it's going to be a problem. And I remember you saying, well, when they see what's, I said, they don't see anything because they can't connect the dots. They are communist by nature. This is just what they're going to do. And they're going to just come to the mail-in with the same attitude. And even though they didn't flip it, the fact that it was so close during that election, that shouldn't have even been the case. And another thing, and that was just crazy. And another thing we have to remember is people always talk about the Cubans. I've been sharing information with the Cubans are in their position, they always have been a conservative bloc, but these younger Cubans are starting to talk about socialism. These younger Cubans are starting to socialize. So socialism is reaching our young people. And when you talk to young Black people, because I told people this months ago, I said, hey guys, what I'm seeing is that Black millennials and young Black people, they are hardcore socialist Bernie Sanders supporters, and they are always, because if you read what they write and you read their content, they're always going against the older Black people who are hardcore establishment voters. So we have that divide. We just have to bring in the middle in a way that they can understand, okay, we have to look at the value. We have to be able to show people the value of why the socialism isn't going to work. And Bernie's, even though Biden isn't coming off as a communist, we all know that, like Hillary, he's an opportunist. And if he gets in that White House, it's like with any politician, except for maybe Trump, he's going to have to pay back the people who got him in there, and the people who are going to get him in there are going to be the hardcore progressives. So that's why you're going to see the progressive parties.
Yeah, I agree. Biden would sign whatever they put in front of him. He comes out now against Medicare for all and all of that, but you know, they backed Obamacare, and you see what Obamacare did to our healthcare
Yes,
markets and our healthcare system.
exactly.
So, but I mean, the only difference between Biden and Bernie Sanders is with Bernie Sanders, you get there on a speedboat.
Exactly.
With Biden, you get there on a paddle boat. It's the same difference. They're going in the same direction. Wow. So that's a lot to unpack.
I kind of see Biden as getting us there on a submarine because he's very very covert with what he's doing. You know, he's trying to act like he's this normal person, but he's gonna have to pay his dues. He has to pay his debt to the progressive people if he's going to want them to support him if he gets the nomination. Because what is the Bernie Bros saying? If it's not Sanders, we're not backing anybody. So they don't want to hear that. So already I saw something today when Biden came out with a plan for Sanders and Warren should he become the nominee. So he's already trying to bring them in. He's trying to bring them in. So they're smart enough to know that, and that's another thing. They're smart enough to understand the big picture. And what I have always had an issue with conservatives with is they're not smart enough to understand the big picture.
Nope.
They're simply not smart enough to understand the big picture. The people that run the GOP, the voters, the people who support them, very few of them are smart enough to understand the big picture.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. On all sides of the Republican Party, nobody sees the big picture, and that's why we get these major defeats on policy. We lose key elections, and even I look at I had a kind of a disagreement with someone the other day who's like an establishment Republican leader, and this guy, they're blaming Trump, and What's funny to me is Trump is more conservative, but he doesn't really say it. He just kind of implement it and let the policies speak for themselves. And this guy went on and on about the image of the office and all this other stuff. And I'm saying, look, I had to pull him aside. I said, look, man, these are policies. Trump is implementing policies that you agree with. So what's the issue? I said, the left is nasty. You've been here, you've been watching them since Bush. They've gotten even nastier. They like to destroy George W. Bush. We lost the presidential election in 2008 when we ran John McCain. We lost in 2012 when we ran Romney. Both of them were kind of, statesmen, smile and wave politicians. I said, Trump is really the president for the time, and he's only temporary. So So just enjoy the implementation. We can get decent later, but right now, we need a guy that can go in there and kind of slug it out because, none of those other candidates that were there in 2016 could put up with what Trump has put up with. Look, we had the Russia thing, and we found out that was a hoax. The Stormy Daniels crap, we found out that was a hoax. And then they tried to pin this whole Ukraine thing on him. And he damn near got impeached over a lie. And so now we got this coronavirus, where the media kind of just hyped everybody into a panic. Now you go to the grocery store, there's no water, there's no toilet paper, there's no nothing. I wanted to get your take on that too. Will Trump get the blame for the coronavirus scare? Or will this dissipate like every other scandal?
I would say this. If you support Trump, he won't get the blame. If you hate Trump, there's nothing he can do anyway, so he will get the blame. Yeah. The question is, how will the people in the middle react? And I would say that really would just depend, since it's early in the year, how will they spend this towards November? I would say that Americans have very short-term memories. And if, and they are the type of people, like most humans, when you're in the midst of the battle, that's where your wounds hurt the most. But as you start the healing process, it's like when you have a bad relationship with someone and you have to break up with them, and then you see them 5 years down the road, and they look good, and you look good, and everything is great, and you forget why you had to break up with them in the first place until you get back with them, and then you remember why you had to break up with them. Like, that's how people's mentality is. So it just depends on how far this will go down the line. If this ends within the next couple of weeks, unless they have something else up their sleeve that they could come up with to try to, tarnish him, I think this will be out of sight and sort of out of mind by November, only because it's not that they won't remember, but because the wounds will not be as bad, especially if people are able to get some type of help. But then again, they could say, well, look at what the government did for you. But then if they say government, then how can they separate that from Trump, because he owns, the highest office in the land? So then, you have to have people who actually understand the process, and then it goes on, and on from there. So I really just think it's about how long this goes on and how quickly Americans forget. And history has shown us that they forget pretty quickly.
I totally agree. I said to myself, and I was talking to someone else as well, said if this thing turns around fast, I saw the press conference today with the coronavirus response team along with Mike Pence, and they laid out kind of the strategy going into the week. I know that now that they're going to start doing drive-ins, which I think is brilliant. I know there was another country doing that as well. I want to say it was Germany, but I could be mistaken. So they're starting to do, places, instead of trying to crowd everyone into the hospitals, they're doing now, mobile stations and drive-ins.
Mm-hmm.
And I told myself, if they turn this thing around in a few weeks, man, it would just be another notch on the Trump belt. If they're able to get this thing under control. I think stopping the flights from Europe and from China was necessary, and it was a good move. Thank God the Trump administration started on this in January. And keep in mind, the Trump administration, they started working on this problem January the 31st. And what was the Congress and where was the Senate? They were having impeachment hearings. So really, who's to blame for this? I mean, how can you blame him when he was working on the problem and Congress and the Senate was tied up on impeachment?
You're right. And that's the thing, that we're going to have to be loud and be vocal and let people know this. We're going to have to really be the eyes and ears to drum roll exactly what you just said in people's memory. Trump started working on this in January when the Democrats only wanted to focus on impeachment for some trumped-up charges. And if you notice, all of this really started coming about right when they had that poll that came out that showed that for the first time in 40 years, Americans were more satisfied with the work of the Republicans in Congress than the Democrats in Congress.
Yep.
You remember that? And
I
then
remember that poll.
Right after that, here we go with the coronavirus. Like, they're always thinking ahead and game planning, and Republicans are usually always reacting. It's like you have to, when you're dealing with liberals, even when you're just talking to them, you have to always be thinking of all angles, because they're all over the place. You have to really think of all angles how to come at them. And really quickly, when you said that John McCain and Mitt Romney would not have been able to deal with the things that Trump has to deal with under his presidency, if either of them would have won the White House, they never would, because they would have given in to the Democrats from the word go.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
So there would be no reason for Democrats to come hard with all of this. They would just stick with the things they normally do: threats, racism, and all that kind of stuff. Like, they would just stick with the game plan that they've been doing for all of these years, and they would never have to deal with what Trump has done. Trump did something that you're not allowed to do, which is actually be on the outside and beat a Democrat. You cannot come from the outside and get on the inside anyway. They don't allow that. And when you deal with these never-Trumpers, you deal with the McCains, you deal with the Romneys, they're mad because they never had the guts to do it. So they don't want to see anybody else have the guts to do it. So I just want to say that because I think it's very important to know that just to show just how special Trump is, and this isn't about just being Trump. Because because you know me, you know I'm one of the few people, like I said, I'm one of the most hated people on Facebook because you never know which way I'm going to go. I really look at the issue. Yeah. And Trump isn't always perfect, but for this time and for what he's done and what he's put up with, there is no one else that could have done it. So that just goes to show that this man loves this country and he truly wants the best for us, for all of us, not just a few people, but for all of us.
Yeah, I don't understand at this point. I don't really understand like the never Trumpers. I mean, they don't really have, for me, a leg to stand on. You know, they want, you know, they don't understand the big picture. Like we're in a critical point. We could lose this country forever. And they're talking about preserving the party. The hell with the party. Look, if you want to preserve the party, follow the Trump model. If that's really your goal, if you want to preserve the party, if you want to make sure that Republicans have a future in governance and that they can win majorities going forward and win the White House and win governorships in the future, follow the Trump model. His message and his implementations of policies have brought, you know, not only Republicans, he's got like the highest approval rating amongst Republican voters like ever. I think the only other one maybe is Reagan. And then he's brought in a broad sliver of support. Like there's independents and there's Democrats that voted for him in 2016. You know, in Pennsylvania alone, I keep bringing this example up to people that I debate with. I'm like, 90,000 Democrats changed parties in Pennsylvania. That is significant.
That's very significant.
Ohio. This guy, and now you have people, they're worried about Minnesota because manufacturing is coming back. And you got people in Minnesota, politicians, Democrat politicians, that are saying, you know, that Trump's our guy. Minnesota.
But I think the thing that we have to remember is, like you said something, if they really want to preserve the party, they don't want to preserve the party. And I've told you this 1,000 times before in our many conversations. They would tell you they want to preserve the party, just like Democrats will tell you that Obamacare is good for you.
Yeah.
The people who are against Trump have no interest in preserving the party. They're only interested in being right and winning the argument. Because if they were interested, number one, you can't preserve the party if you don't want to preserve the country. Okay? Country first, then your party. Because guess what? Without America, there is no Republican or Democrat. It's just communist. So everything is out the window. So if you don't want to preserve the country, you don't want to preserve the party. You're giving lip service. That's all they're doing. They're prideful, they're arrogant, and they are mad that they lost the argument. And that's all they care. They're just like John McCain, and they're just like Mitt Romney. Because anybody can be wrong. That all they have to say is, you know what, we did not think this was our guy, but he's doing everything we would want to do. And the same thing that I try to tell people in 2016 when we were leading up to all the primaries is we have to think about, like, we're in a cultural war. The flack I got for saying that. But we're in a cultural war, and part of that cultural war is looking at the court systems. Quietly and behind the scenes, look at the kind of judges he is putting on benches in different courts across the country, when the Democrats before that stacked the courts with all these activist judges who basically throw out the Constitution and just interpret laws based on their agenda. If you don't see that, you do not want to preserve the party. You simply want to be right. And one thing Chris Christie said, and I always repeat, and I agree with, conservatives don't care about winning the election. They only care about winning the argument. That's it. The election is just, it doesn't matter. If they have to win, then great. But the thing is, they have to be able to say that they were right, and it burns them up to know that they were wrong.
Yep. I totally agree. I definitely think, there's a lot of conservatives that are just, too short-sighted about this. And, this is a key moment to get it right, to start to swing. I read this book. It's, I don't know if you've ever familiar with, but it's a really good book. It's called Pendulum, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And in this book, it talks about, it's an amazing book. This guy talks about, it's by Michael Drew and Roy Williams, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the book, it talks about different generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about either we're going to, there's a generation that comes along that, there are me generations, and then there are we generations. And depending upon the attitude of that generation, really, it plays a significant part of shaping current events, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, when I'll just give you an example out of the book that he used. So, during the Great Depression, we were kind of a we generation, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody kind of stuck together. Everyone saw the big picture because there was just so much poverty in the land, right?
Mm-hmm.
World War II, same thing. That same generation that went through the Depression, handled World War II. Then we got around to the 60s and the 70s, and then we turned into a me generation, right? The boomers. You had all of the things that happened during that age. You had the women's rights movement. You had Woodstock. You had, all this, people were more open about their sexuality, individualisms. So, but now, so years later, we could be going back into a we generation at the wrong time. So you look at these millennials and Gen Zers, and some of their mindset, and then if you look at what's being presented before them, socialism, and if they're the generation that makes that decision, it could be bad. It could be a bad we generation for the country. It's a deep book. I don't know. I read weird stuff, but I thought that was a good book because it really kind of breaks down, our systems of values over time. So
it sounds good.
Yeah, it's a good book.
No, it sounds good. I probably would check it out. I'm doing a podcast and talk about books and different things and bring out different things. So I might add that to my list.
Okay, talk about. You know what? Tell my audience, because it's like thousands of people. Tell my audience how to reach your podcast.
Well, I haven't done it yet. So when I do, maybe at that point you can have me back on, and then I can have some content for them. So I'll do it that way. Yeah,
because you're awesome. Your content on entrepreneurship and business, and it's some really good stuff. I like the way I think really that's the approach. I think we are in kind of a we generation. We're like teetering there. As the book, as the book stated, there is like a 40 year shift. So every 40 years it kind of shifts. But I believe that some of the millennials can be outreach to, and I think entrepreneurship is one of those things. Business entrepreneurship, people that own business. I think teaching the youth about finances and entrepreneurship is one of those ways that we can kind of shift that cultural attitude.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because if you own a business, you know, you're much more aware about the economy and taxes and so forth. And
you'll be surprised.
I know a lot of liberal business owners too. I'm like, dude, how can you be a liberal? Like, you're a millionaire.
And that's probably why they're liberal, because if you just like with the millennials, you know, they're embracing this socialism. It's because when you don't have to struggle, when you don't have to fight for it, it's like with anything, you don't appreciate it as much. That's why people say you don't want to spoil your children or whatever, because they don't want to appreciate it so much. And, you know, what we have now coming up is you have people who are they're saying we, but they're really me. You know, they have these people who feel they have to fight for these causes. You know, it's never about the cause. Actually, it's really about them. They just want to be the one. Everybody has this God complex. It's not really about the cause. They just want to be the one to say how they champion it for this, you know. They don't really care about the poor family that they get food to. Look at me. I gave these poor people food because they couldn't feed themselves. So they're going to say it's we, but when you really look at the motivation, it's me. And I think that's what you have with a lot of young people today, unfortunately.
Well, I think this might be unfair to some of our listeners, but I think what happens, especially on the left, they pervert purpose. You understand? If everyone is, you know, under the Christian beliefs, everyone is here for a purpose. And we all want to feel like that we have something that's greater than ourselves that we're contributing to. And so what happens with young people, especially on the left, I feel like these people, they do not discover their purpose. And that somehow gets perverted and exploited, right? I'll give you one issue, climate change, right? So if you're not in your purpose and you're not being fulfilled, and it's easy to sell global warming or climate change to a person that's unfulfilled, that's not critically thinking, and that kind of thinks with their emotional, neurotic self. It's easier to sell a global warming argument. For a person like yourself, it's not as easy because you critically think, because you're on your way to your purpose. People that are purpose driven critically think because they don't waste their time. So
right, and you know, it's the same thing that I've said before. There's a reason that terrorist groups, just like pimps and drug dealers, they look for people who look like they're down on their luck. And they'll come behind them and be everything they need and then get them into this crazy world. And that's kind of what liberalism has become. That's what the progressive movement has become, unfortunately. You know, they look for these people who are looking for meaning. You know, they don't know the Lord, because if they did, they would have their meaning. They're looking for something to fulfill them. And here comes someone saying, when you get to be a part of this cause, and everybody as humans, that's how we're made. We're made to want to belong to something. So it's taking care of two big needs, the need to belong and the need to feel fulfilled, like they're contributing to something. So they get all, you know, confused in the head. Like you said, in school systems today, and the parents have not been much better in teaching their children how to think critically, because I don't care what anyone says. I know that peer pressure can be very important and very, you know, all-consuming with young people. But I was a young person at one point in time. I don't have kids, but I was a young person, and guess what I always knew? Nobody in the street, nobody in the school had my best interest more so than my parents. So I'm a firm believer that if someone from the outside could come in and tell your kids more than what you can tell them, you have failed as a parent someplace somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that just should not be happening. The parents should definitely be having that type of influence in their children's lives.
Yep. Man, that's spot on. That's spot on. Well, I'm not going to hold you too long. I know you're busy. Thank you for coming on. I mean, your analysis is just so spot on. You definitely got to get that podcast going, because I think your voice is kind of needed out there, because it's nothing more valuable right now than a critical eye, right? And so, I mean, that's just key. You know, if we're going to reach people and we're going to spread like the message of, you know, American values, you know, I want to say, let's say Americanism, you know, that's my term, you know, whether it's conservatism or whatever, just true Americanism, patriotism, capitalism, and we're going to spread the message. You got to have like a critical eye, and we got to be able to connect. And, you know, I've been fortunate to be able to connect to a lot, you know, of people, especially people like you. So thanks for coming on. We're definitely going to have you back. Get that podcast going. We need that thing, man.
And thank you so much for having me. And I really appreciate it. And I'm just proud of your success, because I remember when you were talking about this, and you just really focused, and you really did it, and it just blew up. And every time I see it, I'm like, wow, Juan is really doing his thing. So that's the motivation for me to get out and do it. So I definitely appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
This is The Cure.